Hey everyone, my name is Sean Cecil from the Oculus Institute, and today I'm going to teach you the secret of how to never be overwhelmed. Okay, so I know I just made a big promise there. Most people are overwhelmed most of the time, and it turns out that there is a very, very simple secret that gives you the ability to never be overwhelmed at all. In fact, in my life these days, I'm never overwhelmed. There's nothing that overwhelms me. There's nothing that happens where I'm ever overwhelmed. Sometimes there are things that I do have to deal with, and that's fine. I deal with them, right? But I never feel overwhelmed, right? Because I know what my priorities are, and I act according to the priorities. And here's the secret: the secret to never being overwhelmed is knowing how and when to say no. Most people have a lot of trouble saying no, and so let's walk through a couple cases where it can be problematic, right? So one is at work, right? So I had a client who. She had a boss who, no matter how much she did, he would always come and give her more. And it was always urgent, right? Yet somehow when she, finally did draw boundaries, somehow all the urgency disappeared, right? I also have another client who has this one freelance client who, he's actually gonna just terminate this client because they're too much of a pain in the ass, right? But again, every week there's this new urgent thing that needs to, that project that we talked about last week, let's put that on the back burner because we've got this new urgent thing, and then 3 weeks later, what happened to that project? Well, I put it on the back burner because this new urgent thing, and there's just all this urgency coming in, right? So if you have someone who's doing that, who's just, giving you endless amounts of work or always urgent crises or whatever, right? You have to draw a boundary there, because if you don't, then nothing's ever gonna change, and their overwhelm is gonna become your overwhelm. Right? And there's nothing, it's outside of your control, right? In fact, in some companies, they actively will always give you work until you're overwhelmed, because that's just the nature of like the twisted freshman hazing ritual, right? So, when I used to work in consulting, there were some partners who would not do that. They just wanted to get a result. That was great. There were some partners where if you weren't demonstrating signs of overwhelm, then they were like, oh, well, that means you can do more work. Regardless of whether that work actually added any value or not, it was kind of like, we just need you to be proving your devotion, that you're willing to be overwhelmed, right? And so people would learn to fake signs of overwhelm and spend a lot of time in the office while not actually doing that much, and blah, 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 blah. So that's obviously a problem. So at work, you need to learn when to say no. And if your company isn't conducive to allowing you to say no and draw reasonable boundaries, you need to find a new job, right? Or go build your own career independently. Another example of saying no is family. So, there's some people who they struggle to say no to their spouse. And their spouse, even if they have good intentions, can very easily become subconsciously used to that, and then not even realize that they're creating this massive problem. And then it just builds up and becomes an issue. And then there's all these arguments, and they're like, well, where did this come from? And they don't realize that, they are asking the other person to put in so much time on taking care of the kids and taking care of the house and all this other stuff, while not putting in that much themselves. You'd be shocked how many people are just not self-aware of things, right? And also this can happen with kids, right? One phenomenon that I've seen a lot is mom guilt, right? This tends to be more prevalent with mothers than with fathers, is they feel the need that they have to be with their kids all the time, and they can't leave them, to tend to themselves for a period, which, during like the really early years, there's a lot of value in that, that interaction, but especially as they get older, right? There's a point where the kids need to learn that, they need to learn to take care of themselves and, not cause issues, right? So, for example, I have a friend who runs, I think it's like 8 or 9 businesses. He's got a lot. He's got 5 kids, and those kids are really well behaved. They range from 2 to 4 to up to, I think, like 13, right? And, the older one knows how to kind of help take care of the younger ones. But so when he has to work, he can go and he can work, and, somebody can watch the kids, even if it's just the older kid. And, there's a division there. Whereas, like, I had a client once, and he had a daughter who was 7. And if he said, hey, listen, honey, I'm going to go spend 2 hours getting stuff done, then she would come scream and bang on the door and scream the F word at him, right? That's problematic, right? So, you want to make sure that, learn how to say no, because if you don't say no to your kids and they become spoiled, then they become problematic, right? Or, the other problem he had was his wife was not interested in spending any time tending to the daughter, right? So at some point he has to say, no, I'm not going to take care of her 24/7 because I have to earn money, because you're not earning money and you're not taking care of her, right? So again, it's this thing of drawing boundaries and saying, I can't say yes to everything, because if you do, you're gonna get overwhelmed, right? And then, another example of people struggling to say no is with friends, Hey, can you help me move? Well, sometimes the answer to that is no, right? Sometimes you've got the time, great. But if you've got a lot on your plate, then sometimes the answer is no. But many people, they have such a people-pleasing dynamic that they struggle to say no. Sometimes people will create, tasks for themselves to, that are linked to validation. They'll be like, oh, well, I have to clean the house. And they clean the house every 2 weeks, and they're like, I have to clean the house spick and span, blah, 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 blah. And they'll create this task for themselves because they like, oh, well, if there's dust over there, then I'm gonna feel like I'm a bad homeowner, right? And they need to learn to say no to their inner perfectionist, right? And that goes farther, that goes, even to relevant things, right? Even if you're working on something, you're working on a project, sometimes that inner perfectionist is just gonna keep wanting to do stuff. And if you don't wanna be overwhelmed, you have to learn how to say no to that inner perfectionist. And then finally, the last thing that you wanna make sure you learn how to say no to is the impulse to veg out. So if you have the impulse to sit there for an hour scrolling through your phone, and at first it doesn't seem like an hour, it seems like, oh, it's gonna be 2 minutes, and next thing, it's like, 30 minutes or whatever, right? That impulse to veg out is something you've gotta say no to. Okay, so we've covered a lot here. We've covered saying no to your boss. We've covered saying no to your spouse, to your kids. We've covered saying no to friends. We've covered saying no to the inner perfectionist, whether that be in, work or personal stuff. And we've covered saying no to vegging out, right? If you learn how to say no in all of those cases, and, whatever other cases may arise, then you're never gonna take on more than you can handle, because you know what you can handle the vast majority of the time. And that's the secret to never being overwhelmed, is to learning how to say no. Before you go, I've got a free gift for you. So if you found this video valuable, if it helped you see the world in a new way, and you're interested in building a career that's going to bring you both personal fulfillment and financial prosperity, then I've got a free presentation for you to help you do just that. So if you go to the link below, it's www.oculusinstitute.com/workshop. That's www.oculusinstitute.com/workshop. Then it'll take you to a registration for a free presentation. It's about 50 minutes long, that's 50, and it's gonna give you the step-by-step process to building your dream career. See you there.